YouTube? Alpha White Wolf bringing you another episode into a project that I've been kind of putting off for a little while, but decided to get back into now that I have a bit of time. So, we are doing another one of these Dungeons & Dragons 101 videos. This time we're looking at how to actually use a character sheet. Now, a character sheet for a new player might seem kind of intimidating, but when you look at it and when you break it down into its constituent parts, it's actually a lot simpler than you might think. So, for starters, a brand new player probably is not going to be too concerned with areas like this, the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, the alignment, the background, or aspects related too much to the physical appearance on this here, the second page. Mostly because those are very much role-playing boxes and areas, so a brand new player might not have too much of an interest in that, but if they do, even better. That makes the actual character all that more enjoyable to watch a person play. Now, this particular video is going to be concentrating on creating a very basic kind of character, a very simple fighter, specifically a human fighter. Now, this is just an example of a blank character sheet that's able to be filled out in a PDF viewer or reader. I will be including a link in the description so you can go and download one of these. But for right now, let's shift over to the fighter example page. Okay. So, as a human fighter, there are already a couple implications to be seen here. First off, I'm going to keep him really simple. His name's just going to be Bob. His name is Bob. He's a human fighter, and he's starting off at level 1. Now, as a fighter, he has these saving throws here. Specifically, his saving throws are in Strength and Constitution. Now, for brand new players who don't know what all this means, essentially these stats are the various stats that go into skill checks, what you do in certain circumstances. So strength is obviously strength. It's how much you can carry. Can you shove a boulder out of the way? Can you break down a door? It also is the stat that is mostly used for melee weapons. There are a couple weapons that can use dexterity instead, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Strength is definitely a useful stat for any kind of class that focuses on melee combat. It's also a really good one for anyone who's probably going to try and be the pack mule of the group. Now, as stated, the fighter has the strength as a saving throw proficiency. So this just means that when we calculate his scores and then get his modifiers, we will add that modifier plus this proficiency bonus, and that will be his saving throw roll. So, for example, let's say your fighter is running around. He is suddenly trapped under a fallen beam from a ceiling. He has to make a strength saving throw in order to shove the beam off of him. He'll roll a d20, and then he will add whatever is in this box to that roll, and if it meets the DC or difficulty class as set by the Dungeon Master, he will be able to shove that beam off his chest and continue on his way. If not, he'll have to try again. Quick little side note, proficiency bonus is something that is level dependent. So depending on what level your character is, your proficiency bonus will increase. Once a character reaches around level 5, their proficiency bonus will increase to +3. Side note over. On to dexterity. Dexterity is basically how nimble you are. When you step on a pressure plate trap and a blade comes out trying to cut off your foot, can you jump out of the way in time? Dexterity is also used for ranged weapons. There are a class of weapons called finesse weapons. These are sort of like the rapiers. These are very fanciful kind of weapons that you can use dexterity as your melee modifier rather than strength. Dexterity is primarily, however, used for ranged combat. So if you're shooting a bow, you will add the dexterity modifier to your hit roll and to your damage roll. We'll get onto that when we actually fill out his attacks and spellcasting area here. Constitution, the other trait that the fighter has proficiency in their saving throws with. Constitution is how hardy you are. Depending on what your Constitution is, you will be able to have more hit points or health points when you start off. A fighter will be able to really use this nicely because it means that they'll be able to take more damage. Constitution also applies to things like holding your breath, any kind of physical resistance. So in the case of the Constitution saving throw, it would be something like you suddenly get smacked in the face by some poison and you need to make a Constitution saving throw to resist being poisoned. In that case, the fighter would have proficiency in that saving throw. Those are the three physical traits that a character can have. These three are the more mental traits. Intelligence is also rather self-explanatory. Intelligence governs things like investigation, how deductive are you, how book smart are you. Wisdom is more street smarts. Wisdom is definitely a trait more associated with things like perception. So perception is definitely something interesting to have, and it forms an interesting relationship with intelligence. Charisma is perhaps even easier to define. Charisma is how personable you are. Charisma allows you to either intimidate people, persuade them to view things in the same way you do, and it really is useful for basically being a more charming or intimidating individual. Now, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and start going from top to bottom and start filling in these boxes. So, our human fighter Bob has a couple things already going for him. First off, as a human, he is a creature of medium size. That means he has a 30-foot movement speed. Initiative and armor class we can figure out after we start attaching the skill scores and start figuring out his equipment. As for those skill scores, you will notice that there's a +1 in each one of these score boxes. That is because humans as a race gain a +1 in all of their stats, and that might seem kind of overpowered, but when I actually talk about the races in a later video, I'll explain that no, it's most definitively not overpowered. If anything, this is kind of basic, because while they do get a +1 in all their stats, that's pretty much all they get. Other races have like lists of things that they can do that easily make them considerably more overpowered than humans. So, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and start rolling up these stats. Alright, so now we have 6 stats that we can use and we can fill in to these boxes. Now, you could go ahead and roll for them if you want, but you can also have a couple other options. There's a pre-generated list where you can use a set of 6 stats, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8, and just fill them in like that. You can also use a point allocation system. The point allocation system is essentially where every stat starts off at 8, and you have 27 skill points that you can allocate to whatever stat in however quantity that you want. I kind of like the rolling, mostly because it allows for a degree of unpredictability, and as such, it can create much more interesting characters. Now, we can go ahead and start figuring out where to put these various scores. And we actually have a couple things going for us. So we have 3 11s, a 13, and 2 14s. This is actually really, really useful. So right off the bat, we can put the 3 11s in these mental abilities. And because of these racial bonuses, all 3 of those 11s become 12s. We can go ahead and put the 13 into dexterity, which with that bonus becomes 14. And those 2 14s in strength and constitution turn them into 15s. Now we can go ahead and figure out the modifiers. Now, a score of 10 or 11 is considered a fairly average score, giving you a +0 modifier. However, 12 and 13 are +1s. +14 and 15s are +2s. So we have our modifiers, and we can start filling in things like the saving throws. Let's go ahead and start putting those in. So as stated, the saving throws that the fighter has proficiency in are strength and constitution. So we're going to go ahead and take the modifier from strength, add the proficiency bonus to get a +4. And because the constitution is the same, it also gets a +4. Dexterity gets +2. And these 3 all get +1s. Alright. This is a nice little quick reference so that instead of having to calculate out the math, even as simple as it is, you can just look at it and see exactly what you need. The dexterity modifier also gives us our initiative bonus. The initiative bonus is literally just a dexterity check. Whenever you enter combat, you roll for initiative, and whatever you roll, you add 2 to it in order to figure out how fast you react to the combat being initiated. Okay, so we can go ahead and start filling in the various proficiencies that the fighter has. Now, as a human, he speaks Common and one language of his choice. In this case, I'm going to choose Dwarvish. Additionally, as a fighter, he has proficiency in all armor, shields, and both simple and martial weapons, so all weapons. As a fighter, he currently does not have any tool proficiencies, but those will primarily come from the background, which we will talk about in a little bit. So, with these stats and modifiers in place, we can also figure out the hit point maximum. A fighter at first level has hit points equal to 10 plus the constitution modifier. So in this case, 10 plus 2, 12 hit points. The fighter at first level will have 1 hit die, and that hit die will be a single D10. Now hit die are used primarily during short rests. So when you sit down, spend at least an hour relaxing, eating some food, drinking some water, bandaging your wounds, you can roll a hit die and regain 1d10 hit points, which could easily help you go from on death's door to almost, if not outright, full health. So, that's pretty useful right there. We've basically filled in the stats, the saving throws, and now we can go ahead and start figuring out things like the skills. Now, honestly, the skills, these are also a bit like role-playing, backstory kind of things. I will say that, for the sake of simplicity, the fighter is proficient in acrobatics and athletics. When I take a closer look at things like the background, we'll be able to figure out more skills that they might become proficient in. So now we come to the fun part, where we just basically go down this list, We attach these modifiers, and on skills that the fighter is proficient in, we add the proficiency bonus. So in this case, dexterity, 2 plus 2 is 4. Athletics, strength, 2 plus 2 also is 4. Those are the only... Oh, here we go. Sleight of hand is also dexterity, so that's going to be a simple plus 2 because he doesn't have proficiency. Same with stealth. Those should be the only physical ones, so that means the rest of these are all just plus 1s. Alright. Now this might seem kind of low tier, and in a way it could be considered that, but all in all, he is an above average character in every way. He has no plus 0 modifiers, so that's really, really useful. Also, while we're down here, let's go ahead and put in his passive wisdom. So for this one, the passive stats are just 10 plus the associated modifier. In this case, 1. Now if he had proficiency in perception, he would be able to add his proficiency bonus to that. I'll leave that alone for right now. If we come back to it with the background proficiencies, we might be able to improve that. Now, we can go ahead and figure out his starting equipment. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make a fighter who has a really good armor class. And fortunately, we have everything we need to do that. The fighter has a couple things that he can choose from as starting equipment. First off, armor. He can choose either chainmail or leather armor with longbow and 20 arrows. I'm going to go with chainmail. Second bullet, he can have a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. I'm going to go with a martial weapon and shield, and in this case, I'm going to go with a long sword and shield. Third bullet point is a light crossbow with 20 bolts, or 2 hand axes. I'm going to go with a light crossbow and 20 bolts, so for that one I'm going to just abbreviate it as LX bow. And in parentheses I'm going to put how much ammunition. And the final bullet point is a Dungeoneer's pack or Explorer's pack. An Explorer's pack has a lot of the stuff that you actually will need for basic comforts. Things like a bedroll, tinderbox, some couple days of rations, some torches, some rope. The Dungeoneer's pack has a couple things just like that, but it lacks things like the bedroll, but it also has these things called pittons, basically metal spikes that you drive into stone to serve as kind of like handholds. I'm going to go with the Explorer's pack, mostly because that is the more versatile one to choose. Okay, so we have his starting equipment. So that means we can automatically start figuring out the things that he can do with all this stuff. So number 1, the chainmail. The chainmail has a flat armor class of 16. So that's already pretty tough to hit. However, he also has a shield, which grants a flat plus 2 to armor class. 18 armor class. So he's already pretty tough to hit. Let's go ahead and start putting in his weapons. Let's go ahead and put in L sword for simplicity and abbreviation's sake, and light crossbow. Now, as stated, melee weapons use the strength modifier as their attack bonus. However, because the longsword is a martial weapon and fighters have proficiency in that, he adds a proficiency bonus. So whenever he makes an attack roll with a longsword, he adds 4 to his attack. The damage type for a longsword is a 1d8, and now we add the strength modifier to the damage, and this kind of weapon does slashing damage. So this weapon, every time he swings, if he hits, he will be doing at minimum 3 points of damage and at most 10 points of damage. That's not too bad. Light crossbow, it is a simple weapon, so he has proficiency. It is a ranged weapon, so it uses dexterity. That's another plus 4. This one is also a 1d8, and because the proficiency, and because the dex modifier is also 2. But this one is piercing damage. So he has some pretty good close quarters and long range combat ability. That's pretty much it for his weapons. We don't need to put anything else here because he doesn't really have anything else. But we can go ahead and start putting in his features and traits. And this is where things get really fun. So first off, at level 1, a fighter can choose what's called a fighting style. And there are 6 to choose from. Archery, which gives a +2 to attacks with ranged weapons. So this would become a +6 in that case. Not bad, but not too interesting for what I want. Defense. While you are wearing armor, you gain a +1 to your armor class. That's very useful. Dueling. When you are wielding a melee weapon in one hand and nothing in your other, or at least no other weapons, you gain a +2 bonus to your damage. So in that case, as long as he's using a longsword one-handed, he will add a +2 bonus damage. So he'll basically be 1d8 +4 slashing damage. Again, kind of useful, but not exactly what I'm after. Great weapon fighting. When you're using a two-handed weapon and you make a damage roll of 1 or 2, you can re-roll that damage roll. But you must take that second roll, even if it's also a 1 or 2. The longsword is a versatile weapon, so he can put both hands on it, but it's definitely not what I'm going for. Protection. This requires a shield. If you're within 5 feet of a friendly target, and that target gets attacked, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on that enemy's attack. However, you do still have to have a shield for it. It's very good as a support fighter, but again, not exactly what I'm after. And finally, two-weapon fighting. Now with two-weapon fighting, this fighting style allows you to add your ability modifier to the damage of the second attack, which apparently you can't really do often. So, useful if you are someone who wants to dual wield, but for me, I'm going for that defensive fighting style. So that gives a +1 to armor class, so that brings it to 19. A level 1 character with a 19 armor class is a ridiculously hard to hit opponent. Also at first level as a fighter, he has Second Wind. Now what Second Wind does is once per rest, either short or long, so either a 1-hour rest where you're kind of cleaning yourself up, bandaging your injuries, or an 8-hour rest where you're literally going to sleep and regaining everything that you lost. Once per rest, you can basically boost yourself back up. You can use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter's level. In this case, that would be 1d10 plus 1. So at bare minimum, he would regain 2 hit points. At most, he would regain 11. Again, super useful if you are in combat, you're hurt, and you really need to get back up to a safe amount of hit points. At level 1, that's really all you can do at the moment with this kind of stuff. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the background. Now, anyone who's not interested in the role-playing aspects or don't really care about things like the background, you can ignore this section. But for those of you who do, let's go ahead and start filling in this stuff. So, for the background, I chose a noble. And I chose this one because it was the one that fit most with a fighter. Things like Acolyte or Charlatan were just not too good for it, as were like Hermit, Sage, and Outlander. Noble, however, has a couple things going for him. So first and foremost, a noble background gives proficiency in the skills of History and Persuasion. So let's go ahead. History, we add +2 to that, so that's +3. Persuasion also becomes a +3. Nice. Additionally, he also has a tool proficiency in one type of gaming set. I would go ahead and probably choose cards. Pretty simple. It's a nice way for him to like go into a tavern and probably supplement his money by essentially hustling someone in a card game. He also has proficiency in a language of his choice in addition to anything else. I'm going to go ahead and add Elvish. That way he has basically all of them. He has the human language, the Dwarvish language, and the Elvish language. He's good at languages. He has the big three already in his pocket. As for his equipment, he has a set of fine clothes, a signet ring, a pedigree scroll, and a purse containing 25 gold pieces. So go ahead and throw 25 there. So not bad. He has a decent amount of starting wealth. Now, I will say this. There's a couple options that you can go with when it comes to having the features of a noble. So first and foremost, a noble could have the feature position of privilege. Essentially, normal commoners will make every effort to accommodate you, if for nothing else than to not piss you off. And you can easily secure an audience with local nobility if you need to. So that's a good for role-playing bits there. However, a fighter noble would probably do better with the variant feature. The variant noble, the knight. Now you can instead swap out the position of privilege feature with the retainers feature. So I'm going to go ahead and put that. So retainers, you can have 3 retainers loyal to your family. Now, the retainers basically serve as this. One retainer is essentially your squire, another noble who's trying to learn from you how to be a knight. The other 2 would probably be something like a commoner meant to keep your horse clean, well-fed, and well-maintained, and a 3rd retainer to clean, polish your armor, and help you put it on. Now, additionally to this, the knight will have some kind of token, something from a noble, a lady, someone who is important to you. I'm going to be basing this off of the bond. Now, with that in mind, I've already gone ahead and rolled for the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Now, I got a 4 for the personality traits. So, in that case, it is, I take great pains to always look my best and follow the latest fashion. Basically, you're the guy who runs around and makes sure that your clothing, your appearance is always at the forefront of modern fashion. So, interesting, but kind of prissy. As for his ideal, I rolled a 6. The ideal is noble obligation. It is my duty to protect and care for the people beneath me. So, now this also carries a specific alignment trait. In this case, it is the good alignment. So we can go ahead and throw in a good alignment there. The third one, the bond, I rolled a 1. I will face any challenge to win the approval of my family. So, with the bond like that, I'll include the basically the token as a family sigil. a small version of the family crest that this knight is carrying around. And as for the flaws, I rolled a 6. By my words and actions, I often bring shame to my family. So this actually works super well. So from a role-playing perspective, he is kind of prissy, but he is very much a heart of gold guy. He will do what he can to protect and care for the common people, the normal people. He's doing everything he can to make his family proud of him, but unfortunately, due to his prissiness and maybe even like stepping on the toes of other nobles, he disappoints his family. He's pissing off other noble people by protecting normal people, and the fact that he's pissing off nobles is the reason why his family is kind of ashamed of him. So all of this creates a very interesting character and a very fun role play. What else? Let me go through here and make sure that there's nothing else that I need to care about. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So as it stands right now, this is a fully developed level 1 character. It is an amazingly well done one, in my opinion anyway. This is the kind of guy who seems like he would be super fun to play. This is definitely a guy who I can imagine pissing off a lot of people because he wants to protect the farms rather than protect the rich guy's estate. But yeah, this was a nice example. As mentioned, this kind of stuff, I'm not too interested in throwing all of this in here, mostly because this would require a lot more stuff. This, especially the backstory, would require actual thinking and a decent amount of storytelling in order to make this workable. And this, the third page, is the spell casting page. The fighter has no magic, so this is not even remotely a concern. The physical appearance would definitely be kind of useful, but not super relevant to me right now. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was a lot of interesting stuff to put in here, and hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of something to play with and make into a character of your own. If this was helpful to you and it was something that you enjoyed watching, because honestly making the characters is one of my favorite things of D&D, then go ahead and leave a like down there. Go ahead and cheer on Bob for doing what he can for his people. Give a thumbs up to Bob in the comments below. That would be really helpful for him. But yeah, so let's go ahead and end this video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell icon to stay up to date with our uploads. If you like this video, indicate so down below, and certainly give that thumbs up to Bob if you like him. And if you have suggestions for future videos, drop in the comments. I've been Alpha White Wolf. I'm signing off. You keep howling, Wolfpack.